Hey guys, this is Baby Doll Soaps and Things back at it again today. Well, this isn't your typical doll video or anything like that. As you know, Halloween is around the corner, right? So 'tis the season to be spooky. All your goblins, vampires, zombies, bats, monsters, ghouls, and etc. are soon to be stalking your streets nearby. Today I decided to do this topic because it was a long time coming and I'm a big fan of horror films. We always make jokes in our community, that the black person, people don't think, oh, black people like horror films. Black people love horror films. But we always make this joke in our community that the black person is always the first to die in a horror film. As we've seen many times, we're in there maybe for the first 5 minutes of a film and then we're dead. You're DOA. Growing up in the 90s and as a late 80s babies, I indulged in all types of horror films, whether it focused on your psychopathic blood murderers, your goblins or ghouls. I took notice that not too many blacks were in a lot of these films growing up. Not even in classical vampire films. So today this topic is going to focus on vampires. And why? Because vampires are such fascinating, versatile, and iconic creatures, very mystical. They happen to be the favorite, of all in Halloween, They continue to fascinate us, especially in cinematic culture. I remember Brad Pitt in Interview with a Vampire, and that was with Tom Cruise, was playing the character Lestat. They made very handsome, sexy vampires. And then watching old Bela Lugosi films of his portrayal of Dracula. But still no black vampires, I recall. I remember when I was about 12, the first black vampire I heard of was Blackula. I'm like, what the hell? Is this like I saw it on the old BT commercial. When I had DirecTV and cable back then. And on the episode of The Parkers, when Kim, Countess Vaughn's dad, portrayed by the late Thomas Michael Ford, who, as Tommy, I'm Martin, was dressed up as a black vampire, and Nikki, Kim's mom, portrayed by Monique, the comedian from Baltimore's finest, called him Blackula. I bursted out into laughter because I always thought he was a, some bootleg version of Dracula that you just put in as a black man. But I did not watch Blackula until I was older. And I have to say that I was, William Marshall done the hell out of his role. What scared me was this bro, I don't know, he was handsome as a man, but when he turned into a vampire, this fool had sideburns on his face, all on his head. His hairline was all the way like here, looking like the Batman logo. I'm like, what in the actual fuck? Okay, what? But he was tall, ruggedly handsome. He had this je ne sais quoi to him. Very deep, commanding, and authoritative voice. It made him, being a vampire, rather erotic. So there goes my hormone speaking for me again, as always. Just me being a woman, folks. Don't take it personal. Hope you like my new glasses. I got them a couple weeks ago, so now I'm with the times. I'm hip. Now, where was I? Okay. In the second and last installment, because there were only 2 Blackulas, Scream, Blackula, Scream, he had excellent rapport with the sexy and very bosomy Pam Grier, one of my blaxploitation idols as a child. I always said to myself, damn, I'm going to be sexy, I'm going to be bosomy, I'm going to be hot smoking like Pam Grier. Now, why do vampires fascinate us today? Well, vampires give off this illusion of being dark, being erotic, and they have a suspicious embodiment of human desires. It could be as to eroticism, romanticism, comedy, etc. Take your pick. Many vampire lovers fell in love with Twilight and all the sagas afterwards. You know, Bella and Edward were the ideal couple. Many vampire lovers, a human falling in love with a vampire. I won't lie, seeing Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt as vampires were very enchanting because they are very smoking hot men. And to play such creatures made it even wow. And of course, you know, we have Chris Sarandon as Jerry Sarandon in the 1980s Fright Night. Was enchanting, smooth, hilarious, and dangerous. He was the neighbor in the mysterious house across from a curious young high school boy who entertained women who never left except for in a body bag. Eddie Murphy's portrayal of a vampire in Brooklyn gave me Nick Ashford vibes. You know, with the suavemente and pimpish like hair. You know, added on for a little bit of Superfly. Was very comical, suave, debonair. Vampires have a unique fitting with, you know, any genre. In the media, vampires are often depicted as very sexual or hypersexual, sensual creatures, you know. Sometimes they come off as innocent, harmless, very human-like. But anything but. I mean, you discover them when they can, obviously. You don't see their reflection in the mirror. That's how you know. They represent another spectrum of sensuality, mystery, sexuality, and intimacy outside of actually being sexual. For example, you know, the whole biting on the neck, sucking on the neck, leaving tacky hickeys. And maybe that's where people got, ooh, biting, leaving on the neck. It's tacky hickeys. Well, yeah, that's true. And biting on the neck is a little arousing. It's sexual in nature, but sexual without really being sexual. When it comes to black women, especially in the media, black women are often hypersexualized without sensuality in the worst way possible. Hence the Jezebel label. Many black women, especially during the black exploitation era, endured. We can go through all these movies. For example, Dorothy Dandridge's 1954 cinematic classic of Carmen Jones portrayed her as a saucy, bossy, and promiscuous woman who do anything to get whatever she wanted from any man she desired. During enslavement, black women were often viewed as being oversexed individuals. Black female slaves were subject to constant breeding with other male slaves and the assault and harassment of their overseers. This was dehumanizing as black women were seen to have no control over their own bodies. In a male-dominated society, women who are sexually promiscuous are often labeled as Jezebel, and this is frowned upon. However, when feminism took over, this gave women, especially black women, a sense of autonomy from patriarchal systems, meaning reclaiming our bodies and becoming liberated, meaning we can have sex, do whatever we want, wear whatever we want, without the boring comments and stares and chastising of our male counterparts. It gave black women the confidence to fully embrace our existence, or that was the illusion it appeared to be. Now, when it comes to cinematic cases, the black female vampire has fallen victim to misogynoir and the same sociological standards as black women in reality. 3 labels black women fall under in cinematography. The mammy, meaning she is subservient, the caretaker, pushy, bossy, overweight, but at the same time submissive, ready to serve, ready to give her all to her employers, care for their children, be the mother, be the nurturer, you name it, clean the house. The Jezebel, the saucy wanton woman who exploits promiscuity and low morals, but is extremely beautiful and captivating and charming. And lastly, the sapphire, the loud-mouthed, sassy sidekick with some crude, rude marks. If you don't know who Sapphire is, go watch an old episode of Amos and Andy. That will give you a true definition of who and what Sapphire is. Here's an example of Sapphire. Marla Gibbs' character, Florence in The Jeffersons. Florence was witty and on her toes, but sassy and unbearable, strong-willed, and even more so, recent. Let's go with Pam, portrayed by Tashina Arnold, from the 90s hit show Martin, with her edgy jokes and comebacks to the protagonist's character. When it comes to black female vampires, she differs from the male vampire counterpart. She embodies the dark side of femininity on a broader spectrum. We're going to talk about a few black female protagonists. Get ready, this is kind of a long list. First, we're going to start off with the lovely Vonetta McGee. Vonetta McGee, who was one of our hailed blaxploitation queens in the 70s. She was portrayed in Shaft, and of course the movie I'm talking about that I was talking about in the beginning of this video, Blackula. Vonetta McGee played two characters, Luva and Tina Williams, in Blackula in 1972. Vonetta McGee starred in the prolific and forever popular blaxploitation horror film Blackula, starring aside from protagonist William Marshall. McGee had a dual role, starring as the leading character's wife in the first part of the film. It began in 1780 as African Prince Mama Walde goes to what was known as Transylvania to seek help from Count Dracula in suppressing the slave trade. McGee portrayed the Princess Luva, his wife. However, Dracula refuses to give help to the prince and decides to make sexual gestures at his wife Luva. After a scuffle with Dracula and his minions, Mama Walde is turned into a vampire after being bitten by Dracula and curses him with his name, Blackula. Luva is left in the chamber with him as he lies in a coffin in a crypt hidden beneath the castle to die in the chamber with him. Let's fast forward nearly 200 years later. It's 1972. Two gay interior designers buy the casket, only to awaken the disgruntled Blackula and become his first victims. He wakes up in search for his wife, Luva, not realizing this is a different century. However, to run across a Tina Williams, who bears a very strong resemblance to Luva, who he believes is a reincarnation of her. Now let's focus on the rapport and chemistry between Marshall and McGee. It demonstrated a relationship between a non-human and human. It was warm, enchanting, romantic, and to some degree erotic. I know I use the word erotic a lot. Erotic. This also displayed a new form of black love between a black man and a black woman. Eventually, this relationship develops to the part in which Tina, Luva, reincarnated, who is now aware of her man's true identity, has decided to, join him and remain. She discovered her man's true identity, and now she has to decide whether to join him or to remain in her human life without Mama Walde, aka Blackula. Tina was an embodiment of innocence, warmth, and one in search of her true desire. Aww. Mama Walde helped her with this. However, at the same time would manipulate her by hypnotizing her to follow through on his plans. This is where the manipulation takes point, and the deception. However, Tina is turned into a vampire by Mama Walde when she was shot and killed by accident by the cops on a stakeout from Mama Walde, as they now discovered he was responsible for all the murders in town. A vampire stalking LA. Isn't that something? However, this is not long, because when Tina's coffin is mistaken for Mama Walde's, she is stabbed in the heart with a stake. This devastates Mama Walde and drives him to commit suicide. Now, this is a vampire first. A vampire committing suicide for his one true love. He commits suicide by casually walking into the sunlight, burning into a crisp where nothing is left of him but bone fragments. Mama Walde becomes depressed because he found his one true love in nearly 200 years, only to lose her again. Tina's character by McGee was one of the first in a vampiric sense to portray a ride or die chick. And that she was for her man, meaning she was for her man. If you watch TV One's For Her Man, she was about that life. She was for Mama Walde, willing to do whatever she could to keep him. She was willing to put all at risk to keep her man she fell for, even knowing he was responsible for heinous crimes in her town and affecting the ones who loved her. The chemistry between Marshall and McGee was impeccable. I guess in a cryptic horror way, this demonstrated a strong bond between a black man and a black woman and their love for one another. You can see probably where Anne Rice and the writer of Twilight got their ideas about humans and vampires intermingling. Blackula received mixed reviews. While it was praised, while it was appraised for the presence of William Marshall, Gene Siskel gave it a 3 out of 4 stars, calling it well made and frightening. Some, however, did not like this because it showed a gay couple. His first victims were a gay interracial couple. And some didn't pretty much did not have a liking or taste to that. But being gay is nothing new. But it was taboo, of course, in 1972, but it was very much alive and well as it is today, Some could say, I'm not going to go too much into detail. If we had that community back then, some would probably say, well, why did the first couple that he killed have to be gay? That's some type of hate crime. I don't see it as such. Now next, we're going to talk about Marlene Clark, who portrayed Ganja Mita in Ganja and Hess. Now, I saw Ganja and Hess last year. Creepy, very creepy movie. I like these old blaxploitation movies, because it actually takes you back. You had less back then, but the movies were more interesting as opposed to what you look at today. You think Jamie Lee Curtis is the Scream Queen? Think again. You must not have heard of the lovely and beautiful Marlene Clark. She was one in her own right. Just watch the 1973 cult blaxploitation film Ganja and Hess. She portrayed Ganja Mita, the widow of Dr. Hess's Night of the Living Dead Dwayne Jones' colleague. She was clueless as to what happened to her husband, but fell in love with Dr. Hess and then uncovered his dark secret. She fell in love with the idea of luxury, living in a beautiful big house, and eternity with Hess, moving into this vast estate. Let's rewind 41 years later. Spike Lee made his own version of this movie called The Sweet Blood of Jesus. Now back to Ganja and Hess. Ganja realized this life she dreamt of with Hess was a nightmare. She was doomed to a life of murder, deceit, bloodthirstiness, and terror. So yes, they killed, they feasted on blood. Vampirism, but this is not what she wanted. Ganja believed that Hess manipulated her into this lifestyle, promising her luxury, but what she failed to realize, the luxury came with a price, which Dr. Hess failed to tell her. Thus returning to a Christian lifestyle and abandoning her dream and wanting to atone for her selfish reasons. In the end, she took a new lover and created a new life after Hess killed himself. The film itself had mixed reviews because it was not your average blaxploitation film, as Blackula wasn't either. It really didn't display racist stereotypes. Well, that's a positive, right? But the movie itself vibed to an experimental eye and not to the general public. Ganja was viewed to be very level-headed, strong-willed, assertive, direct, and well aware of her self-worth. Some would compare her to the architectural type of a sapphire. The film captivated and embraced her independence and her autonomy. Despite its obscurity, the film continues to live on as a pillar of black horror films. Clarke remained a scream queen for some time and even performed in other low-budget horror films. Talk about your scream queen. Ah! I can't really scream because, my voice. Okay, let's move on next. Also to 1973. Pauline Peart, who was the vampire girl in The Satanic Rites of Dracula. The lovely Jamaican bombshell by the name of Pauline Peart got her chance at being a very sexy vampire in the 1973 horror film The Satanic Rites of Dracula as a sexy and tempting vampire girl. This would be her breakout role, starring opposite of Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. Christopher Lee, who tall, debonair, thin guy, the man in the golden gun, and he's played many vampires, played in many Dracula-like movies. Although her role was small, it was forever memorable. She had this exotic look with her bright, beautiful, tempting eyes, long, flowing, voluminous hair, and a glare that would hypnotize any man. Not to mention a voluptuous figure that would entice any man to inquire about her. Now her character fit the seductress Jezebel role. The Satanic Rites of Dracula was a British chiller that took focus on the bloodthirsty count portrayed by Christopher Lee, who takes up residence in modern London to develop a new strain of bubonic plague with all evil intentions of annihilating all life on Earth. This would be the 8th film in Hammer's Dracula series and the 7th and final one to feature Christopher Lee as Dracula. Dracula lived in a countryside house in London, in which satanic rituals were being celebrated. Peart was shown in scenes partaking in the rituals, as she was one of the sexiest vampire girls to Dracula. This was a pivotal role as it was depicted that black women too could adjust to horror films, instead of stereotypical roles that Hollywood set forth. But still, Peart's depiction of the vampire girl didn't draw far from the Jezebel role that black women are often given. But it did open doors for black actresses to fall into vampiric or horrific categories. If you're wondering, well, I'm not going to spoil it. You want to go watch the movie, go see it. Peart had a small role, but it was a significant one, but very small. She didn't have a name. She was just a vampire girl with a few other vampire girls credited, but she's definitely noticeable. Next, you have Teresa Graves, Countess Vampira in Vampira or Old Dracula, 1974. Next up, we have Teresa Graves, who starred opposite of the British King of Comedy, David Niven's. Vampira is the wife of Count Dracula. The movie was a spoof to the vampire genre and was retitled Old Dracula for the US release in an attempt to ride the success of Young Frankenstein. In the story starts off with an old Dracula. He's aging. He is forced to host tours of his castle in hopes of luring new, young, vital victims. This was an attempt to revive his long-lost love, Vampira. Dracula needs to find a victim with a very specific blood group combination to resurrect Vampira by a blood transfusion. So he sets out to collect blood from the bevy of the Playboy playmates visiting his enchanted yet haunted castle his castle of doom. However, one of the playmates, whose blood is drained, is black, turning a revived vampire into a black woman, Teresa Graves. This was the first interracial horror film in a comedic sense. Teresa Graves embodies vampire from a black woman's perspective. She did bring some soul and attitude to the horror film, often referring to Dracula as a jive turkey. She was somewhat of a Jezebel, and a sapphire, being sassy, provocative, and seductive at the same time. David Nivens was the highlight of the comedy within the film, but Teresa Graves didn't do so bad herself. This was very different from her typical Christy Love character. However, this didn't sit well with the audience. After all, it was 1974. Still, people were not too fond of an interracial couple. Critics said the movie was a mess, giving it 1 star out of 4. Nivens stating that Nivens was the only one who brought something to the movie. Well, I beg to differ. But then again, it's 1974. People back then still had a very closed mind, rather. Okay, next, let's fast forward 12 years later. My Error. Grace Jones, Katrina, and Vamp, 1986. Ooh. Grace Jones is a legendary centerfold and fashion icon in her own right, setting the mold for black artists in the 1970s, 80s, and beyond. She starred in Vamp in 1986 as a vampire by the name of Katrina. Her role in this film did not disappoint the audience at all. The story is about 2 old college bros. Keith by Chris Makepeace. The actor's name is Chris Makepeace. And AJ, actor Robert Rusler, perusing through old bad parts of towns, only to end up at a strip joint where Katrina Jones steps on stage and performs a type of striptease in full body paint. She was in full body paint. She succeeds in turning one of the brothers into a vampire, AJ, but unfortunately Jones does not carry throughout the film. That's okay. All she needed was that one time, and she became forever memorable to all. However, Katrina's stage performance is iconic, and is often memorized as the best scene in the movie. Katrina wears red hair, white face paint, and blue contact lenses as a form of projecting and promoting Eurocentric beauty standards, in which Jones faced a lot of criticism for being a dark-complexioned black woman portraying such a role, making it seem as if dark-skinned black women are not good enough or ashamed of their looks. It was suggested that black women should highlight their own beauty and not someone else's, which is true. Black women are beautiful in their own right, but after all, it was a movie. Katrina was considered to be an embodiment of a goddess wrapped in immortality and darkness. Her dance was to exact revenge on the white male gaze, while asserting her autonomy, beauty, and grace. Sort of the succubus, Jezebel, temptress box that she fits into. Now, one day if Grace Jones is really up to it, I know she's now 75. Hopefully she'll be willing to play the vampire she wants to be. And at her age, it doesn't look bad. Next, let's fast forward to 1995. Angela Bassett, Detective Rita Vader in Vampire in Brooklyn. Vampire in Brooklyn was a 90s classic. It was a black comedy and horror film directed by none other than Wes Craven. Angela Bassett, who starred opposite... Well, let me go back to Wes Craven. Wes Craven directed a lot of the Scream sequels. That's Wes Craven. Rest in peace to Wes Craven. Angela Bassett, who starred opposite of Eddie Murphy, was Detective Rita Vader, a Dhampir. You want to know what a Dhampir is? It's spelled Dhampir. That is a half vampire, half human, who is female. Detective Vader Bassett is the laughingstock of her team at NYPD Blue, and is often cited to be crazy. She is still dealing with the death of her mentally ill mother, who was a paranormal researcher some months prior. Max Murphy is in search of this damn who happens to be a native of his island. And of course, a reminder of his past love. There we go with Blackula. 23 years later. Vader is ignorant to her vampiric lineage. However, it is up to Max to bring out the truth about Rita's true nature and wants to turn her into a full vampire and live out his days with her. The movie showed a modern-day romance between a full vampire and a half-vampire. Rita would have a lot of flashbacks in a paranormal sense that made people deem her psycho, but Max was the only one who understood her. Now, this was a different role for Angela Bassett. Usually, this differed from her dramatic portrayals, as she was in a movie not long after she was nominated for What's Love Got to Do With It as Tina Turner. Interesting. I like Vampire in Brooklyn because it was comedic, it was modern, it mixed a bit of the past in with the present. And I didn't think she would have such rapport with Eddie Murphy, but Eddie Murphy was a smooth operator. Coming in looking like Nick Ashford from Ashford and Simpson with his Suavemente Superfly perm. It was funny. He knew everything about her. Everything about her. More about her than she knew about herself. Captivating. But at the same time, horrifying. Next we have Sanaa Lathan and N'Bushe Wright, who portrayed Vanessa Brooks and Dr. Karen Jensen in Blade, 1998. Vanessa Brooks, Sanaa Lathan, and Dr. Karen Jensen, N'Bushe Wright, are two versatile black women who navigate the world of vampires versus humans in this early cinematic adaptation by Marvel in the late 90s. Vanessa is the mother of Blade, the story protagonist, who is a daywalker, half human, half vampire. Vanessa dies, or what appears to be, she dies in the beginning of the film. As you see, she is rushed to the hospital in 1967, the year that Blade was born. She is bloodied up, apparently was attacked by a vampire, and is bleeding out while giving birth to her son. It was assumed that she died because we didn't see her anymore in the film. However, it was later discovered Vanessa did survive the traumatic childbirth and became a full vampire. Meanwhile, Karen's ex-boyfriend, Dr. Jensen, became a vampire before her eyes after Blade infiltrated the blood rave. I remember that blood rave. The club and all the blood coming out of the drain, out of the sprinklers, and people were going buck wild and people were getting bitten up. Yeah, I remember seeing that as a kid. I'm like, eh. She too almost became a vampire. However, she discovered a cure for vampirism, created some kind of serum. And she is placed between the war of vampires, cops, and humans. Both women are paralleled in the film, but it focuses more so on its main character. Eventually, Vanessa is killed by her son, Blade, portrayed by Wesley Snipes, and Dr. Jensen goes on to create the cure for vampirism. And of course, I couldn't wait to speak about her. Next, we're going to go into 2002. Oh yes, my love, baby girl. We're going to talk about the one and only Aaliyah as Queen Akasha in Queen of the Damned, 2002. The gifted and renowned Grammy-nominated turned actress Aaliyah was at the top of her game when she was tragically killed in a plane crash in 2001. God, don't bring me back to 2001. The highlight of my young teenage years, as Aaliyah was one of my favorite R&B idols out here. You know what? Let me not become a cheer. Let me just get on with the program and not be a tearjerker. That still hurts today. Despite this tragedy, her performance as Akasha in Queen of the Damned is respected in both mainstream and underground communities. The world is introduced to Akasha when Lestat, portrayed by now Stuart Townsend, awakens her from her centuries-long slumber with the stroking of his violin. It is revealed that Akasha is the Queen of the Damned, the mother of all vampires. Along with her king, the royal couple fell asleep when they ran out of humans to feast their bloodthirsty hunger. Due to them conquering all of the world, there were no humans left for them to drain. Akasha was very malevolent, sociopathic, and narcissistic. She lacked empathy for anyone as she lusted for blood and was unstoppable to anyone who crossed paths with her. She seeks carnage when she comes across the Admiral's Isle. The Admiral's Isle is a hidden punk rock trash group. Well, actually, it's like a bar, golf club for vampires in Old Town London. She asserts her dominance by being seductive. There you go with the Jezebel, with her hypnotic dancing, murdering all the vampires who were talking trash about her lover Lestat with a blaze. Aaliyah depicted this role as a black woman asserting herself in a primarily white subculture space, and this was considered to be genre defining at best. In the early 2000s, it was still taboo to be a black person navigating into such a role, such as alternative lifestyles, music, etc., without it being classified as a white thing or being weird. All embraced Aaliyah's representation of Akasha worldwide and inspired black people to embrace their livelihoods without renouncing their blackness. Although Aaliyah's scenes did not make the final cut, her performance will forever be iconic and will forever be a part of cinematographic art. Forgive me for that. She was often credited as being the Scream Queen. Aaliyah had a love for horror films and fantasy. Now, yes, I love Queen of the Damned, and I'm so glad. I know at first when I was reading, they thought of using Jenna Dewan. I'm so glad they decided to go with Aaliyah because Akasha was an Egyptian queen. She was Egyptian, and I know Aaliyah had a fascination with Egypt. She collected Egyptian art in her apartment, had Egyptian hieroglyphic tattoos on her. So I definitely think she fit the bill. And last but not least, Rutina Wesley as Tara Thornton in True Blood from 2008 to 2014. Everyone loved them some Tara Thornton, especially in this weekly, if you tuned in weekly to True Blood. Tara was a queer vampire who made viewers fall in love with her. Now again, queer vampires, and this is a new age vampire. This was a vampire who was a part of the LGBTQ community. QIA community. However, her character was still evolving and had so much more potential. Tara's character was always reduced to the sassy black chick in a town full of Confederacy gentiles, and she had a mother who shamed her for her lifestyle, her mother who could not stand her choice of lifestyle, her being queer. Tara was always true to herself despite being faced with self-hatred, anti-blackness, and misogyny. Her only desire was to be loved by those around her, including her mother. She became a vampire after she attempted to save Suki's life and had no choice but to turn him into one. Tara had a hatred for vampires, and it was ironic that she sacrificed herself in return and turned into the very embodiment of what she hated. And this was a personal regret to her. Tara suffered also too. She was very sassy. So she fit in, if you want to be this, because she lived a lifestyle of promiscuity. She was queer. You can fit her into the Jezebel box. And you can also fit her into the Sapphire because she was sassy. She had a comeback for everything, you know? But she was also a shattered little girl deep down inside because she suffered with a lot of trauma from her past scars that she never really healed from, thus becoming what she loathed, you know? She never reached her full potential character-wise, but she did become a part of vampirism and was wrapped in that enigma. Well, I know this was pretty long. I thank you for tuning in. I'm actually going to do another video on black horror films, but I had to do this Vamps retrospect of black women in horror films because it was a long time coming and I wanted to do this. So I'm going to end on this note, folks. Baby Doll Soaps, thank you for calling. Thank you for coming in and watching me, subscribers. This is Baby Doll Soaps and Things signing off.